In the first year of the resumption of the college entrance examination, I tore up my test paper in public and went to the mountains to herd cattle. When Greg's daughter, who had always been a child prodigy on the farm, heard about it, she went crazy on the spot. In my previous life, I took the college entrance examination with Greg's daughter, but I was stigmatized as a cheater just because the answers on my test paper were exactly the same as those on hers. She was the first one to hand in the paper in our examination room. Even my fiancé testified that I had plagiarized. I pleaded my innocence everywhere, but no one believed me. In the end, I was banned from taking the exam for 3 years and lost my qualification to return to the city. I was forced to stay on the farm and endure Greg's harassment day and night. Finally, having fulfilled my obsession, I was labeled as promiscuous, beaten, and frozen to death in the couch. When my parents heard the news and wanted to prove my innocence, they were labeled as capitalists. Their property was embezzled, and they died with hatred in their hearts. Until the moment I died, I couldn't figure out how the answers on my test paper, which were the result of my hard study day and night, could be exactly the same as hers. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to the day before the college entrance examination. The Northway held outside the window. "Simone, open the door. I'm here to bring you the test paper," came the voice of my boyfriend, Dan, from outside the door. After confirming that there was no pain in my body, I realized that I had been reborn. The calendar on the wall showed the day before the college entrance examination in my previous life. Dan also braved the cold wind to bring me the mock exam papers. Looking at his chapped face from the cold, my heart ached because it was also this face with a ferocious expression that slandered me for cheating in the previous life along with others. In the winter of 1977, I was eagerly waiting for the results of the college entrance examination at home. But a group of people burst into my house and dragged me to the teaching affairs office. I was shocked when I saw the 2 identical college entrance examination papers. The parents outside the examination room all sided with Greg's daughter, Cecilia, saying that they had seen her leave the examination room first, so I must have copied from her in order to prove that I wouldn't cheat. I went home and found the draft papers I had read and during my review and showed them to them. The papers were filled with densely packed questions, but they tore up the draft papers one by one in front of me. Everyone on the farm knows that Greg's daughter is a child prodigy. She has been excellent since she was a child. You're just an ordinary student. Do you think you can fool us with a few draft papers? I think this daughter of the intellectual just can't stand the fact that there's a child prodigy on our farm and wants to go to college by copying her papers. My boyfriend also stood up and testified against me. I had no way to clear my name. Not only were there pieces of paper thrown at me, but I was also beaten. In the end, I was banned from taking the exam for 3 years, immediately sent back to the farm, and deprived of my qualification to return to the city. From then on, Greg harassed me more blatantly under the pretext of revenge, often groping me in front of other commune members. When I resisted, he slandered my reputation everywhere until the villagers threw me into the couch and beat me. In the cold winter, I swallowed blood mixed with snow. The taste of blood filled my mouth. And all I could hear were the curses of Greg's wife. "You little slut. How dare you seduce our Greg? Go die." Later, my parents were also dragged down by me. Not only did they fail to prove my innocence, but they were labeled as capitalists. Their property was embezzled and they died full of hatred. Just thinking about it made me feel phantom pain all over my body. I never expected that the college entrance examination I had been looking forward to for 4 years would become a death warrant for my family. Given a chance to live again, I must find out the truth and make all those who slandered me restore my family's innocence. Dan's loud voice rang in my ears again. "Simone, what are you thinking about? Do this test paper quickly. After that, we'll go to Teacher Zhu's house together. Cecilia is there, too. And then we can listen to the questions Teacher June has predicted for her." Looking at Dan's sincere and simple appearance, it was hard for me to associate him with the ferocious look when he slandered me in my previous life. But why did he change so much? And why were there 2 identical test papers? People on the farm all said that Cecilia was a child prodigy. Although there wasn't even a single book at her home, she could always get good grades in every exam. While others praised her, I wasn't envious at all because I could answer all the questions she could, but I had always been afraid to reveal my true strength. The year I went to the countryside, my mother cried and told me that I should study, but not be too ostentatious. Otherwise, it would bring disaster. So, when the examiners showed the 2 test papers to everyone, only my parents believed that every stroke on my paper was written based on my years of accumulation. Because I had read all the books left by my grandfather before going to the countryside and I had never given up studying all these years. With my knowledge, I was more than capable of handling the first college entrance examination. As soon as I heard that Cecilia was at Teacher Zhu's house, I immediately stopped looking at the test paper, packed my things, and rushed to the Zhu family's house. As soon as I entered the door, I heard Cecilia shouting, "I'm about to figure it out." "What's the rush? She was biting the tip of her pencil and her math exam paper was still blank. When she saw me enter, her eyes were startled and then she forced a smile. There were several examinees in the room and Greg was also sitting beside Cecilia accompanying her. When I saw him, I couldn't help but tremble with fear and quickly sat next to Dan. As soon as I took out the test paper to look at it, Cecilia started writing quickly. After I finished calculating all the questions, Dan grabbed my draft paper and read it with great interest, comparing the answers with others everywhere. Cecilia crossed her arms and waited for Teacher Zhu to grade her paper. Teacher Zhu, I told you I could remember it soon. I leaned forward to look at her problem-solving ideas. And sure enough, they were the same as what I had written on my draft paper. Remembering that she didn't start writing until I entered the room, I couldn't help but suspect that she had seen my answers. Just as I wanted to get closer to see her steps clearly, Cecilia pushed me away. Simone, you're so eager to see my test paper. Could it be that you can't do it yourself and want to copy mine? Dan was unhappy when he heard this. Cecilia, why are you speaking so rudely? This isn't the college entrance examination room. What's wrong with looking at your test paper? Greg sneered. Maybe there are really people who dare to copy others' test papers in the college entrance examination room. I was shocked, remembering the miserable situation when I was slandered for cheating in the college entrance examination. My back suddenly went numb. Why did Cecilia and Greg say such things? Did they already expect that I would write the same answers as Cecilia? Dan didn't dare to contradict Greg and could only come over to comfort me not to take their words to heart. Looking at the way Dan stood up for me, I was filled with doubts again. I hid my strength and was willing to be a poor student. Dan was the only one besides my parents who knew the truth just because of this. He often spoke up for me and wouldn't allow others to look down on me. But after the college entrance examination in my previous life, he was more certain than anyone else that I had copied Cecilia's test paper. I was sitting behind them and clearly saw Simone keep glancing at Cecilia's test paper. Besides, Simone's grades have always been mediocre. How could she write an essay like Cecilia's? As the only eyewitness in the examination room, every word Dan said pushed me into the abyss. Seeing the way he cared about me now, I couldn't figure out why he betrayed me. Cecilia pushed and shoved Dan intentionally or unintentionally. It seemed like she was resisting, but there was a lot of physical contact. Could it be that Dan showed her my answers? But this could be done in private. The college entrance examination room was so strictly supervised and I was sitting behind Cecilia. How on earth did she manage to write the exact same answers as me? I was full of questions, but the more I thought about it, the more confused I became. Before my mother and I were sent to the farm, Cecilia didn't have the reputation of a child prodigy. Not long after we arrived, rumors started to spread on the farm that there was a child prodigy in Greg's family. Cecilia hadn't studied for many days, but she could recite Tang and song poems at will. After that, she skipped several grades in a row. When the news of the resumption of the college entrance examination came down, she was eager to take the exam. Thinking of this, I stared at Cecilia in a trance. She noticed my gaze, gave me a sideways glance, and there was nothing but provocation in her eyes. These math problems are boring. Why don't teachers predict a topic for the Chinese composition for us to practice? The teachers readily agreed and said to me with concern, your foundation is better than Cecilia's, you can first think about the ideas. If you really can't write it, it's okay. I smiled, took the topic, and took a look. It was easy. In less than 3 minutes, I had conceived the whole essay in my mind. I picked up the pen and was halfway to writing when Cecilia finished. Everyone clamored to see her masterpiece. Cecilia pouted and said in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, actually, this essay shouldn't have been written down. If someone copies my essay as material, wouldn't I be unable to clear my name? When Greg heard this, he shouted angrily, who dares to slander my daughter? Our Cecilia is the #1 child prodigy on the farm. If she can't write something, no one else can. If someone writes the same thing as her, they must have copied from Cecilia. Greg's tone was sinister, and as he spoke, his eyes kept glancing at me. The scenes of him harassing me in my previous life came to mind. When I saw him again, I felt so nauseous that I couldn't speak. The other students all echoed, saying that no one would dare. Who would dare to copy Greg's daughter's test paper? That would be courting trouble. After everyone discussed for a while, they urged Teacher Zhu to grade Cecilia's composition. As soon as Teacher Zhu glanced at the essay, he exclaimed, wonderful. In the first year of the college entrance examination, everyone's foundation is generally poor. Yet you can write such mature text. Even in a university, this essay would be considered excellent. Looking at the unfinished composition on my draft paper, I was filled with doubts. Could it be that Cecilia was really a child prodigy? Or a prodigy who could master knowledge without books or teachers? I stood up, ignoring the gazes of the people around me, and took the composition from Teacher Zhu's hand. My eyes wide, I read it word by word, afraid of missing a single punctuation mark. It was exactly the same as the essay I had conceived in my mind. I clenched the draft paper in my hand, but I clearly hadn't finished writing it. How did she know what I hadn't written on the paper yet? Could it be that she had the ability to foresee the future? While I was thinking about where things had gone wrong, a sharp pain shot through my hand. Simone, what did you write? Let me see. Dan snatched the draft paper from my hand, and my heart skipped a beat. Give it back to me. I jumped up and snatched the draft paper back, tearing it into pieces in a few strokes. The students and teachers in the room were all stunned. Dan was obviously shocked by my abnormal behavior and stood there in a daze. Cecilia raised her eyebrows, reacting so strongly. Could it be that you wrote something shameful? Or maybe you copied from someone else? Everyone's eyes turned towards me. I tightly clenched the pieces of the draft paper in my hand until my nails pierced the thin paper and dug into my palm. I didn't listen to whatever Dan was going to say. I just picked up my school bag and ran out of the Zoo family's house. I can't imagine what the consequences would be if they saw that I had the same article as Cecilia. I almost got the reputation of plagiarizing someone else's work just like in my previous life. As I walked home, I felt scared. It was the coldest time of the year. I was wearing a sweater and walking in the cold wind, and cold sweat even soaked my back. Tomorrow is the college entrance examination. If I really have a telepathic connection with Cecilia, then no matter how I answer the questions on the test paper, it will be the same. It's too terrifying. It's also too strange. When I got home, my mother was sitting by the stove adding firewood. The rich girl who used to not even touch the spring water with her 10 fingers now has blisters all over her hands after the news of the resumption of the college entrance examination came out. My mother was the happiest one in the family with tears in her eyes. She said to me, Simone, Mom has finally waited for this day. Go take the exam. You must take it. She said that when the college entrance examination came, she saw the light of hope. I looked at the expectant look in her eyes and felt uneasy in my heart. If I go to take the exam, I might die wronged, just like in my previous life. If I don't go, I'll be sorry for my mother's earnest expectations. I tried to stay calm and not let my mother notice anything strange. What's wrong? Are you too nervous? My mother still noticed. I let out a sigh. It's okay. This is the first year of the resumption of the college entrance examination. There's still a long way to go in the future. If you don't pass this time, there will be another chance. My daughter has studied hard for so many years and will definitely pass the exam. The next day, my mother got up early to prepare breakfast. She took out the cured meat that we had been reluctant to eat at home and put it on the table. I felt uncomfortable seeing it, but I didn't dare to take risks. The college entrance examination is important, but the life and death of the whole family is even more important. I put my admission ticket in my school bag and went out. I can take this exam, but I can't take it in the original way. A bold idea suddenly popped into my mind. This might not be the best way, but I have no other choice now. Cecilia had already been sitting in the examination room early, and our examination numbers were next to each other. I hesitated outside the examination room and entered the examination room at the last moment when the bell rang. When she saw me, she let out a sigh of relief. The movement was very subtle, but I noticed it. Now that I think about it, she has always been paying attention to me. When I appeared at Teacher Zoo's house with the mock exam paper that day, she had the same expression. If she knew what I was thinking, I'm afraid she would be the one feeling uneasy now. When the bell rang, the test papers were distributed. I carefully read the first few questions on the test paper. Cecilia started writing. I didn't write for a long time, but she answered the questions very smoothly. I closed my eyes, stopped thinking, and tried to empty my mind and forget everything related to the exam. The sound of answering questions in front of me suddenly stopped. It was as if Cecilia's pen depended on my brain. When I thought it output answers when I stopped, she couldn't move forward. Then I heard a sound that broke the fate came from the quiet examination room. This examinee, what are you doing? Who allowed you to tear up the test paper? The invigilator loudly scolded me. I smiled and said, I'm sorry, teacher. The questions are too difficult. I can't answer them, so I'm giving up the exam. In front of me, Cecilia's back was shaking. She suddenly turned around, her eyes shooting out a cold light like an icy blade, wishing she could pierce me immediately. I spread my hands, walked to the invigilator's side, and said, what's going on? You should leave the examination room quickly. Don't disturb the other examinees. I picked up my school bag and rushed out of the examination room. The parents outside the examination room were surprised to see me. Have you finished the exam so quickly? This child is really amazing. He must be able to get into Tsinghua University or Peking University. I laughed ostentatiously and caught a glimpse of a person in the crowd whose expression was particularly noticeable. It was Greg. He frowned, his eyes almost squeezing together, and it was hard to see the position of his pupils, but there was no doubt that he was looking at me, his mouth pursed, his lips tightly closed, his cheeks puffed out, and he gritted his teeth. I waited for the crowd outside the examination room to disperse, and they told me to go home and have a meal and prepare well for the next subject. I threw my school bag behind me and shouted, "I'm not going to prepare. I'm not taking the exams for the following subjects. I'm going home to herd cows." The crowd was in an uproar and then started making a noise. Hey, having so failed my obsession. This child is actually a poor student who handed in the paper early. Those who heard it couldn't help laughing. I thought he was really amazing. It seems that the first one to come out is just like that. I also laughed.
Yeah,
the first one to come out is just like that. But Greg couldn't laugh this time. You little brat. Who allowed you not to take the exam? He rolled up his sleeves, squeezed out of the crowd, and walked up to me in a few steps. He raised his hand to give me a slap. I smiled playfully, which seemed to anger him. He swung his fist, but it didn't come down for a long time. After all, the public security outside the examination room wasn't just there for show. As soon as I shouted, they surrounded Greg. What's going on? Why are you hitting the examinee? I wiped the blood on my face from the left side to the right side and said a grief lie. Uncle, am I? Protect me. This man is beating the examinee outside the examination room. My head hurt so much from the beating. Greg stared with his eyes, and the veins on his face were all tensed up. Go back and take the exam. Did you hear me? When the public security took Greg away, he was still shouting for me to go back and take the exam. Fortunately, my mother arrived in time. Otherwise, I would have thought Greg was my father caring so much about my college entrance examination. My mother touched my face and her eyes were full of distress. This bastard, he hit you so hard. I smiled and said it was okay. It's just that I'm afraid I can't take the college entrance examination this year. My mother was stunned and hugged me tightly without asking anything. She said that it didn't matter if I couldn't take the exam. The knowledge was in my head as long as I wanted to take the exam and there was still a college entrance examination. I could take it at any time. I went home, took some steamed buns, and went up the mountain to herd cows. But as soon as I sat down on the slope, Cecilia came looking for me. She came at me with a fierce expression and demanded that I go back and take the exam. I didn't work in the farm for nothing. I had a lot of strength. She couldn't drag me, so she started punching and kicking me. I slapped her and pushed her aside. And Dan also chased after us. Simone, you should go easy. After all, she's Greg's daughter, and we can't afford to offend her. Cecilia patted the dirt off her, but got up, her voice from shouting. I order you to go back and take the exam. If you dare not to, I'll make sure your whole family can't go back to the city. I sneered. It's better than staying here if we can't go back to the city. I saw Cecilia give Dan a look and said, You haven't forgotten what you promised me, have you? If your girlfriend doesn't listen, you won't have a good time either. Dan quickly nodded and whispered something to Cecilia while carrying me. He looked humble and hesitant, as if he had something to hide. I waited for him to explain to me, but he didn't say anything and pulled me down the mountain. Simone, I know you're smart. In the past, you didn't dare to let others know. So, you didn't dare to show the questions you did to the teacher. And you secretly hid the articles you wrote and didn't dare to read them to others. But now, it's different. The college entrance examination has been resumed. You should show your talent. Why are you still hiding it? Dan didn't have much ability, but he was honest and considerate. When my father was sent to the border, my mother and I were transferred from the commune to the farm. Thanks to the secret support of his family, we suffered fewer white eyes from others. But now I can't figure out whose side he's on. I'm not taking the exam. Even if I take the exam, I won't take it with Cecilia. I shook off his hand and sat down under the big tree by the village. I refused to move like a child throwing a tantrum. Dan suddenly changed. There was no more tenderness or consideration in him. He grabbed my hair and tried to pull me up from the ground. I had never seen him so savage. You have to take the exam with Cecilia. When he got angry, I couldn't resist him. He dragged me for more than 10 meters. My cotton-padded clothes and pants were all worn out. I shouted desperately. Finally, several villagers came to my rescue. They held hoes and sickles and drove Dan away. Among them was Madame, who was always muttering something in the village. She looked at me with a fixed gaze and kept muttering about ghosts, gods, and the Lord. When I tried to leave, she tied me up with her arms. I struggled hard and she tied me even tighter. Girl, listen to me. There's an evil spirit on you. You have to get rid of it. When Madame shouted like that, I stopped struggling completely. Although feudal superstition is not something to be believed since my mother and I were sent down, I've encountered and heard a lot of strange things. Many of them can't be explained, and we didn't dare to think about them in detail. Madam turned my shoulders around. Girl, didn't you have a really bad headache for a while, and there was always someone chanting spells in your head? I nodded. But that was a long time ago when my mother and I first arrived at the farm. As I spoke, I noticed something strange about it. When we were transferred from Lange Commune to the farm, we lived in the Murphin house at the entrance of the village arranged by Greg. During that time, I often had a headache. I told my mother that I was going to die, and I couldn't sleep at night. There was always someone muttering in my ear. My mother was worried about me and stayed with me every night, but she fell into a deep sleep before midnight and couldn't be woken up. I was so scared that I went to Dan and asked his parents to help me. Uncle Yu and Auntie promised to help. Unexpectedly, 3 days later, my headache really stopped and there was no one talking in my ear anymore. For this reason, my mother was like being possessed and immediately arranged my engagement with Dan. I didn't know anything except reading. I just thought I'd have an extra playmate and I'd think about the future later. Madam shook me and I came back to my senses. Is there anything special about this headache? I didn't dare to underestimate it anymore and put on a serious expression. When Madam saw that, tears welled up in her eyes. Good child. Someone has cast a curse on you. This curse is really evil. It might even kill you. I can help you, but you have to believe me sincerely. As soon as I heard there was a way to save me, I quickly counted out money to Madam. It's not that I was too hasty. But it was really strange that Cecilia could think the same as me. Now, after ruling out all doubts, the least likely thing might be the truth. Madam said that my boyfriend Dan might also be involved in casting the curse because this curse can not only make people share the same thoughts, but also suck the essence of the opposite sex around. Dan was always hanging around me and he couldn't have been unaffected. Judging from the way he dragged me just now, he probably performed some kind of spell to avoid the evil spirit on me. I was puzzled and asked Madam what to do next. She went home and fetched a talisman, telling me to carry it with me for 3 days and not to part with it even when sleeping. There was another condition. I mustn't see Cecilia. After 3 days, she would come to my place, and burning the talisman to ashes would break the spell. I thanked her, but I couldn't let this matter go. Madam, to be honest, I've already died once. In my previous life, I was terribly wronged by the Gregg family. In this life, I can't just let them off. Upon hearing this, Madam's expression changed drastically. Girl, so you've suffered a great injustice. That makes things easier for those who have returned from the dead with grievances. This talisman can be used for counterattack. However, the person must drink the water made from the burnt talisman. I thought to myself that since I trusted Madam, I should follow her instructions. When I got home, I told my mother the whole story, then moved into the cellar of our house, waiting for Madam to come and burn the talisman after 3 days. But those 3 days were far from smooth. On the first night, Cecilia came to my place, demanding to see me. Simone, I'll stay at your house. I don't believe you'll hide forever. Cecilia shouted inside the house. And I could hear every word clearly from the cellar outside. The neighbors around asked what was going on. Cecilia said brazenly, Simone got my dad arrested and I want an explanation from her. When I heard this, I almost scoffed. Fortunately, Madam had also warned me that if I spent too much time with Cecilia, the memories in my mind would continue to be transferred. So, I must cut off all communication with her. She probably had this in mind, too, wanting to stay with me overnight and make me solve some problems in the middle of the night to extend the transferred memories, at least to help her get through the next day's exam. Thankfully, I had previously pasted another talisman given by Madam on the cellar door. This way, even if we were in the same yard, she couldn't share my thoughts. In the middle of the night, still unable to find me, Cecilia grew anxious. She shouted that I, a young girl, had a bad reputation for not coming home at night and even called Dan's parents next door. Several people crowded into my yard to watch the commotion. The cellar door was stepped on so much that dirt was falling through, making me cough continuously. I was so afraid of being discovered that I held my breath until my face turned red. Dan's mother, who was usually reasonable, suddenly raised her voice. Simone's mother. Where is your daughter? Say something. A good girl doesn't stay out all night. If Dan marries such a girl, our family will be shamed. My mother had always valued this engagement almost obsessively. But today, she actually put this aside. If you think it's shameful, then let's call off the marriage. Your family wants to marry Simone. But I don't want Simone to marry into your family. What are you saying? If it weren't for our family helping Simone recover from her illness, would she be so healthy now? It seemed like something was thrown on the ground, causing the ground to shake. Then my mother's voice came. These are my diary items. The most valuable things in our family are here. If you want to calculate the favor of treating her illness back then, you can take all these. However, treating an illness is one thing, and forcing someone to marry as repayment is another. I won't let my daughter marry into your family. When the villagers who came to watch the commotion heard this, they started to discuss. They were right. One shouldn't sell their daughter just to pay off a medical debt. Dan's mother felt so ashamed that she covered her head and went home with Dan's father. No matter how much Cecilia shouted, they didn't look back. Since Cecilia's plan didn't work and she didn't wait for me, she went home dejectedly the next day. Naturally, she didn't take the college entrance examination. When someone in the village asked, she said she was sick and couldn't take the exam. 3 days later, Madame came to burn the talisman. And I also called Dan over. Dan seemed to have lost a lot of weight in just a few days. When he met Madame, I invited him to sit down, but he suddenly knelt down in front of me. Simone, my parents didn't mean to cause trouble. After all, we're still going to get married. Don't let these rumors affect our relationship. As for the time I forced you to take the college entrance examination, I didn't think it through, but I did it for your own good. Without a diploma, it will be hard to get a quota to return to the city in the future. I smiled. No difficulty could be worse than being framed in my previous life. I helped Dan up and ignored his words. I carefully wrapped the powder from the burnt talisman in front of Dan and hid it deep in the cupboard. Dan asked me what it was. I said mysteriously, Madame said I was bewitched before and someone could steal things from my mind. Now the spell is acting up again. I can't get rid of it completely, only suppress it with medicine. But this medicine can't fall into the wrong hands. Or I'll lose my mind completely. Dan's fingers trembled slightly. He looked up at me, his pupils shaking. After only a few words, I sent him home. In the middle of the night, hearing noises near the cupboard, I knew he had come to steal it. Unexpectedly, instead of giving the ashes of the talisman to Cecilia, he drank it himself. Human greed is immeasurable. I thought Dan was just Cecilia's lackey, but in fact, he also wanted the ability to share my thoughts. After drinking the ashes of the talisman, screams came from Dan's house. Dan's parents cried out desperately, and the whole village went to see what was happening. People crowded from his yard all the way to my doorstep. Those who came out of his house said Dan had gone crazy. He had been unconscious on the ground, and it was only after his mother's cries that he seemed to come to his senses. But as soon as he woke up, he shouted that he was Greg's daughter from the farm. This scared Dan's parents, who thought he was possessed. No matter what they did, like burning incense, praying to Buddha, or finding a witch, nothing worked. When Dan saw himself in the mirror, he was also terrified. Without saying a word, he wanted to run to Greg's house. Simone, why don't you come with me to Greg's house and take a look? After all, he's still your fiancé. A villager pulled me towards Greg's house. I didn't get too close. Just watched from a distance. Dan banged on Greg's door like a madman. Greg opened the door, cursing, and kicked Dan in the chest. What's the hurry? Going to a funeral? Can't people sleep at night? Dan winced in pain but still called Greg Dad. When Greg's wife heard this, she flew into a rage and demanded an explanation from Greg. Just then, Cecilia came out, her shoulders swayed as she walked just like a man's gait. Seeing Dan's mother dragging her son and crying, she asked Greg to let Dan in, saying they should figure out what was going on first. Once the gate was closed, the villagers couldn't see what was happening and dispersed. Dan's parents, however, stayed outside Greg's house all night. When Dan came out of Greg's house at dawn the next day, he was even more insane. He was covered in bloody wounds and kept shouting that since his parents didn't recognize him, the family might as well break up. He ran to the town and reported that Greg had taken bribes using his position, withheld files privately, and obstructed the transfer of farm personnel. When the authorities came to investigate, the villagers learned that several female commune members had been harassed by Greg. Before the punishment was announced, someone beat Greg up in a sack. Greg was knocked unconscious and lay on the ground all night, freezing to death. When Greg's wife came looking for him, she was so scared that she lost her wits. On her way back to seek help, she fell into the river from the bridge and drowned. When Cecilia heard that both her parents had died and that the investigation team was going to confiscate their property, she shouted that she wasn't part of the Greg family. But no one believed her. One late night, Cecilia stabbed Dan to death with a knife. Everyone said it was impossible. How could a young girl like Cecilia overpower Dan? Only I knew that Cecilia's recklessness came from having Dan's thoughts in her mind. And Dan didn't resist because the Cecilia in his mind instinctively thought she couldn't beat the opponent. I later learned this from Madame. If Cecilia had drunk the water made from the burnt talisman, she would have returned the luck accumulated from the knowledge stolen from you over the years. But since Dan drank it, something extraordinary happened. Their minds were swapped automatically and they formed a life and death bond. If one died, the other couldn't live either. Sure enough, before Cecilia could be sentenced, she died mysteriously. When Dan's parents heard the news of their son's death, they aged 10 years overnight and became listless. After seeing the downfall of these two families, my mother was filled with fear and said, "As long as I'm alive, that's enough." I smiled and said, "Mom, what are you thinking? Not only will I live, but I'm also going to prepare for the college entrance examination." The following year, I became the only child from the farm to be admitted to university. The new farm leader was very upright. He led the villagers to see me off with drums and gongs, and my files were soon sent back to the city. My father was also rehabilitated that year and our family of 3 was finally reunited in our home in the city. On New Year's Day, our family ate dumplings while looking at the snow. Madam asked a young villager to send me a letter. It said that there was something strange about the old house where my mother and I stayed. At first, the Gregg family probably targeted us because we were from an intellectual family and wanted to cast a spell to share our thoughts. But the Dan family intervened halfway, and the contract was only half formed. Dan got a wife for nothing, and Cecilia could only access the part of my thoughts that were currently in use. As for Dan's betrayal later, I'm afraid he thought I was no longer of any use. Reading the letter, I recalled the absurd events of a year ago. It was like a dream. Fortunately, heading fulfilledly, this time, the dream didn't consume me. I put down the letter and picked up a book with my family around me. In this life, I can finally be a frightened innocent scholar. Just like this, everything is perfect.